Toyota donated $55,000 to Republicans who objected to certifying the 2020 election, significantly more than any other company. That's according to data gathered by the left-leaning watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington.
In response, Toyota said, quote, "We do not believe it is appropriate to judge members of Congress solely based on their votes on the electoral certification." I actually agree with that statement. I don't think this is the best gauge. What they, by the way, are actually saying there is that they want to influence people with their money regardless of where they fall on the political spectrum, so long as they're pro-corporate. That's what they're really saying in that statement, if you're really parsing it and reading between the lines. But I actually think it's a fair point that judging people based on that particular vote is not the best way to judge their value as members of Congress, because there are some people who are populists and made that decision, which I completely disagree with, but they are good on a lot of other issues. I don't like seeing that particular vote as a disqualifying one. I don't think it was a good vote, but I also don't think for good members that it's disqualifying. What should be disqualifying is the corporatism, and that's what Toyota is in fact saying is qualifying them to receive this money.
Well, on the one hand, in 2017, you had a number of Democrats who objected to certifying the Electoral College for Trump. They couldn't get any senators to come over and agree with them, so it didn't become a kind of bicameral thing. On the other hand, some of these votes and objections were raised after the storming of the Capitol. It's one thing if it's a performance. It's another thing once the performance has triggered a mob to ransack the place, and you have someone who's just been killed outside the chamber, and then they come back to the floor, and instead of saying, you know what, let's maybe come together here and see what we can do about this, they still vote. But the bigger point that you raise is that corporations are now increasingly finding it difficult to navigate this political terrain where the country is so divided along kind of and partisan lines have become moral lines, and that you see liberals saying that they're not going to buy Toyotas anymore, which so
more Priuses.
Yeah, there you go. And actually, this could be decent for climate change if you already have right-wingers who are buying Teslas to trigger the libs. So you've got them buying electric vehicles now. Now, if you could get some of them buying Priuses to trigger the libs, hey, all the better.
A bunch of Trump voters are now going to be rolling up to the mega rise in fleets of Priuses because of the $55,000 of donations.
I will be very owned if they do that.
Again, what they're trying to do is buy influence basically without fear or favor, so long as it happens to be somebody who is pro-corporate. And I would say actually some of the least pro-corporate members of Congress are probably people like Josh Hawley, who found themselves in this interesting set of circumstances where we forget often, especially in Washington, and this is also on the left. You look at people like Barbara Lee, we forget that people are supposed to represent the population. We covered on this show a poll from The Hill, exclusive polling from The Hill, that found 56% of Republicans don't believe the election believe that Joe Biden was elected because of electoral fraud. So when that gets translated into chunks of people in Congress, that shouldn't be surprising. We just have to learn how to deal with it. We have to learn how to create a political climate where people make better judgments, and people have, and that's not saying I know what the right judgment is in every case, but where we can all sort of come to an agreement about what constitutes basic facts and what constitutes truth, but then to act sort of shocked and surprised that the House of Representatives represents the people I always find that very distasteful.
Yeah, and a better idea would be stop taking corporate PAC money.
Right, yes.
And so any of these right-wing populists who wanted to drain the swamp, wanted to fight the system, wanted to vote to block the certification of the election, but then they also want to take corporate money from a Japanese car maker. It's like, well, who are you lying to here?
Yeah.
Are you really draining the swamp here? And is Toyota's PAC the one that's helping you drain this swamp?
Yeah, and that's the perfect question. And people in Washington like to sort of kick back and judge the rubes. And when you're judging people, it's the same thing that happens to like Dennis Kucinich and Barbara Lee, as I was saying earlier, to Cori Bush. People in Washington love to kick back and judge them as rubes and say what idiots they are. But what actually is happening there is they're dealing with their inability to grasp where the country is. That's a judgment on voters. It's not just a judgment on Kucinich or Hawley. It's a judgment on voters. And the problem is you have this sort of top-down condescension and arrogance and a lack of an ability to say, this is translating into Congress because it's what a lot of people agree. That's a much more difficult thing to deal with than just the votes themselves.
And you do have a number of Republicans now who won't take corporate PAC money. A lot of them because they're worried about woke corporations.
Yes.
Which is okay. Fine.
Remember when Marco Rubio floated the concept of unions to deal with wokeness?
That's right. We'll show you. We'll show you. Wait till he finds out what these bargaining units are like. I don't think he's going to like that much either. Do you think that this is going to be a growing phenomenon of Republicans refusing corporate PAC money? It seems to be maybe fewer than 10 in both chambers at this point, but it seems like it could pick up steam.
I think it's going to even out actually on both sides of the aisle to the point where Republicans were behind the curve, and then you had literally corporate Democrats like Kirsten Gillibrand doing the same thing in the 2020 primary, which is just so laughable. I mean, basically that was a litmus test for most people in the 2020 primary. Even Democrats that are sort of centrists on economic issues, the litmus test was corporate PAC money, and I think you'll probably start seeing that happen more and more on the right. It'll take the right a little bit longer, but I do think ultimately it'll even out, especially there's no signs of the wokeness stopping. So when you already have prominent Republican senators floating the idea of unions to deal with that cultural issue, it's a huge sign that you're going to see more and more Republicans probably swear off that money because it's what voters are going to want to see.
Could it matter in a Republican primary? So you have, let's say you have something saying, hey, this guy takes Coca-Cola and Disney PAC money, and Coca-Cola and Disney are woke critical race theorists who are trying to destroy the country. Therefore, this Republican is a woke critical race theorist who's trying to destroy the country. Let's throw him out of office.
100%. You will see that be a huge issue in the upcoming primary and in upcoming primaries in general. I remember over a year ago, like January 2020, I reported on the subsidies that Georgia Republicans and Democrats give to Hollywood. And it's a great example. I think I asked Eric Erickson at the time, what is going on? Like, why is this allowed? Why are they subsidizing an industry that they hate on this cultural level, and it's not an issue? They use the sort of facade of jobs, which is not a real facade, it's an illusion. Like, they actually aren't creating that many jobs, or they're not boosting the Georgia economy in a great way, to take this money from an industry they purport to hate. And again, that curtain is getting peeled back, and there will be major, major incentives, just like there were on the left, on the right, to do the same. And we are already seeing signs of that. As unbelievable as it may sound, it's happening.
They're going to drain the swamp.
No, they're not going to do that, but they're going to try to look like they are. We have more Rising for you coming up after this. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be notified every time we post new content.